this is Luetin and welcome to my complete overview of the Battlefield 4 multiplayer reveal. Now, having pretty much taken a break from the inevitable bum rush that is E3 video content for YouTube, I've had a much more relaxing approach this year. So having sifted through the information, I've put together my first thoughts overviewing the Battlefield 4 multiplayer as we currently see it. Many of the elements in this video will require further, more detailed analysis that I will cover in further videos. Now, we've seen a lot of small tweaks that will hopefully benefit gameplay in Battlefield 4 multiplayer, and first off I want to say that I think it's important to note that many of the changes we see in the gameplay are small tweaks, not sweeping changes, and this is really important and it's fundamental to ensuring that the Battlefield 4 experience transitions across smoothly from Battlefield 3. So what are we talking about when we say this? Well, game elements such as acquiring more points for spotting targets, squad leaders gaining extra points for designating objectives and priorities for his squad mates, and then the changes we've seen with the suppression mechanics now being more focused around the support class but being less effective for other classes. Now, me and some other YouTube producers also speculated about that pre-E3. These changes are vastly important but are done sympathetically enough to not break the fundamental core experience of the game. There are other aspects though that have larger game-changing implications, which I have to say I'm very excited about, and these changes are things such as vehicles now having depleting ammo for main guns, and squads now being built around a 5-man player model, and of course the biggest change to the game experience, the reintroduction of the commander mode. All of these elements will have a big question mark over them as to whether or not they will have a positive or a negative influence on the game as we know it. Vehicles may now find themselves quickly running low on ammo, and the days of tank whoring long-range kill sprees are going to be coming to an end for the majority of situations. Will this mean that we see a resurgence of true tank commanders who know when to run and pick their engagements carefully rather than sitting there being constantly repaired and just bursting down the ammo on the enemy? The 5-man squad is something that is very exciting indeed, and it's one of the biggest changes that I think we're going to see in the game. Everyone is talking about commander mode, suppression and the massive building destruction, but to me the 5-man squad is something that I really think is going to be one of the most significant game changers, giving you more options and more power and a greater ability to successfully engage with your enemy, and I'm going to be elaborating on that in another video. But we can't ignore commander mode, of course not. It's a huge change to the game and one that I would say is exciting, but at the same time leaves me with a feeling of anxiety at the same time. The concept of having a one-man commander able to designate tasks and bring into play powerful support tools is one that really will change the Battlefield, and for those players not familiar with older Battlefield titles, it's going to be even more of a shock. And it's with this retrospective look that concerns me. Battlefield players are not what they used to be, and this is due in a large part to the success of the game. It's a victim of its own success in many ways. Now, I regularly on a daily basis hear from subscribers and just fellow Battlefielders of the difficulty public players have in finding a game that is not horrifically one-sided and back-to-back steamrolls on a server. Now you throw commander mode into the mix of that and suddenly it makes for a game of Battlefield that's even more intimidating than it was before. But do I think that commander mode shouldn't have been included on that principle? No. I feel that commander mode will simply mean that players will have to fight for those objectives if they do not want to be dominated even more than they were previously, and this is simply something that comes down to how much do you want to fight for the win and not for your own agenda. Perhaps with the changes we see to the game elsewhere, this is going to balance and compensate for the inclusion of new tools and powers given to those players. The destructibility is another element change within the game, and right now these seem to be quite scripted. So for example, in both the tank drop and the skyscraper destruction, those would in effect be known mechanics. They're known situations. When you destroy the mechanic, the element that is going to enact that sequence, you know how it's going to play out. And once it's happened, you know that if you hit that spot again, you'll get a similar reaction each time. It can't be said that these large scripted destructions are not impressive. For sure, they are environmental changes that will have large implications for players on the ground and the game overall. But it may mean that in Battlefield 4 we're still not seeing the more sandbox style destruction that some people were hoping for, and it's going to be more in line with those previous Battlefield titles. And speaking of the large scale destruction we saw of that skyscraper, this is hugely exciting for two reasons. The first being that this will mean we now have massive environmental changes happening live in game, and that is really unrivaled. These massive sequences really put Battlefield 4 on top as the most engaging and advanced title, and it really reaffirms the belief that DICE are producing titles out of reach of other current developers. It also gives a massive level of excitement for titles such as Battlefront and what could possibly happen there. But in relation to in-game situations, these large-scale destructions will offer hugely immersive and adaptable gameplay, meaning that one map could produce massively different priorities and requirements as they play out. But perhaps more exciting than this is the possibility that my map design from the Battlefield Premium competition is actually now a realistic possibility. We already saw with the Angry Sea gameplay a level design similar to that of the other entries in this competition, which showcased an internal aircraft carrier close quarters style gameplay. Now, my design was one of 10 winning entries, and I envisaged a fight over a large hydroelectric dam, which eventually resulted in that dam being destroyed on a massive scale and revealing a new objective behind the wall of water. At the time I posted my breakdown video several months ago, many people, myself included, said that whilst it would be awesome to have, it was probably unrealistically, possible to create in the game. But with the huge skyscraper destruction showcased, the first thing I thought of was that it could actually now be feasible, that this event could be designed into a map. So we'll have to wait and see, and I'm certainly keeping my feet on the ground and not expecting this to be included in Battlefield 4, but if it were, how amazing would that be? And if you never got a chance to see my full map design video, I've linked it below in the notes, so go check that out. Now, some other elements that have been generally noted are things such as, for example, the netcode. Now, this has been improved apparently. There's going to be less sort of things like rubber banding, dying behind corners, and then from that sort of thing you can assume that other elements that go along with this, like better hit detection, smooth environment interaction, all those things are going to be affected by netcode. The game itself looks overall much more refined. I think it has just a refined feel to it. The guns look to be much better generally for their handling, and we can see that perhaps they've maybe pulled back the strength of some of the recoil on weapons to perhaps provide a more rounded experience for everyone, and with some of the other small tweaks we've seen to just refine things back and make the experience more engaging and enjoyable for all, I think that's certainly possible. I get the impression that with Battlefield 4 what they've tried to do is just finesse, just finish things off, just get it down to that level. Of course, some people are going to say, well, we're back to that whole situation of, was Battlefield 3 just a sort of foundation platform for Battlefield 4? I think that's a different conversation to be had. Tracers are now more visible, and you can, with that they denote their bullet drop a bit, and this can be very useful when you're trying to effectively establish range markers firing at long distance engagements. Another good change as well to infantry weapons is they now seem to damage vehicles, again as with previous Battlefields, and this for me is a welcome change to bring back. It makes plenty of sense that in some light air vehicles could easily be damaged by assault rifles, and I think it's going to make pilots think even more carefully about how they engage their targets. It's certainly going to make my favoured driver LMG choice for tanks even more viable now. Tank turning apparently is a bit slower and more realistic for PC, and this perhaps goes towards what we've mentioned before in other videos and discussions, that PC controls often, they're so fast and twitchy when the vehicles just, they don't seem to have, they don't behave in anything like a very realistic fashion. So it could be that DICE have possibly attempted to counter this and impose a more natural behaviour for vehicles, more like what you see with the console, where you actually have to sort of turn and think about where you're going to move, because you can't just whack the vehicle around all over the place. And this also links in with the decision to include limited ammo with vehicles, which is definitely going to be a game changer really when it comes to vehicle play. So often we would see a 2 or 3 man crew dominate a battlefield, but now those roles are going to become much more limited and require a change of squad tactics, or have the commander mode sort of be involved there, which I'll talk about in a moment. But with the machine guns on tanks, you apparently do still get unlimited ammo, and this seems fair when you consider a tank's capacity to carry this kind of ammunition. Now the commander mode, and one of the first things I want to highlight, which was confirmed by Carl Magnus himself in an interview, is that the commander cannot be killed by the enemy and has no physical battlefield presence. So for those Battlefield 2 veterans who are hoping to score some trolling humiliation kills for videos on enemy commanders, sorry, denied. So we've only seen the commander mode currently for Conquest. Now, whether or not it will be included for Rush, it remains to be seen. It depends a lot on what other changes, if any, they've made to the Rush game mode, and as a huge Rush fan, you know I'll be eagerly awaiting more info on that, and if it's included we can speculate what that will mean for the Rush mode at a later date. Now, capture points tie in with what abilities you as a commander are able to utilise, and we've already seen this with Conquest in Armoured Kill, the ability to provide your team with an AC-130, not a commander choice but a passive choice. So the concept will not be so alien for players moving forward that capture points are important. However, what will be even more important is for people to quickly learn on the new maps which points are critical to control for those maps. For example, what I mean is a large open map is probably going to be obviously more beneficial to having an AC-130 in there than a Tomahawk, and a more densely structured map may benefit from those tools being reversed for making a pinpoint target hit to remove dug-in infantry or armour. We also saw Commander mode being used from a tablet in the demo, but Commander can be used from in-game screens as well. However, I think that whilst it's a bit of a novelty being able to sync and use a tablet for your Commander screen, it could be potentially faster and just provide you with the other options of flexibility. It'll be interesting to see what live benefits it offers when we can get our hands on it, but something that Carl Magnus noted was that you can be a Commander from anywhere. So this is an interesting point. For example, like if you're on the go, you've got your tablet, maybe you're sitting at a railway station, you're waiting for a train to come, you've got a 3G connection or whatever, you can get there, you can sit there and use the commander mode. So you can actually be involved in Battlefield games wherever you are as a commander if you've got your tablet right there. And that is quite an exciting thought to have indeed. Commanders can choose where to designate their support for the team by selecting an area to deploy an AC-130, UAV or UAV EMP, and this is obviously important because if you were unable to do this, you could end up with support tools operating in an empty or unimportant areas of your field of operation. And this also ties into how important it is to have a commander who understands the importance of prioritizing tasks and being able to predict and preempt an enemy force. There are some extra abilities that were not live in place, such as vehicle deployment, which is probably going to be a similar style of the deployment we saw in Endgame, as they've already developed and built that into the Battlefield world, and it will be a great and strong tool to have that from day one in Battlefield 4 maps. A supply drop as seen in previous Battlefield titles is being brought back, which will most likely have similar effects as we've seen in the past, such as healing troops, supplying ammo, and so on. It's basically an all-purpose support tool. And if, for example, you have a team of defenders who've been holding out against a strong opposing force but maybe don't have any team members nearby ready to give them support and resupplies that they need, or perhaps more importantly using a drop to resupply your vehicles now, and the ammo is going to be a factor there for tank commanders, so having that sort of relationship with your commander overall is going to be very, very important. Maybe he notices on the map that a certain squad has been holding out defending a certain base for ages and ages and ages, he might want to drop them down there some supplies. And perhaps the last thing to note, which I think is fantastic and again an inclusion that sets Battlefield apart from other similar pretenders, is that the knifing animation now has a counter, and this is such great news. It will definitely be a slap in the face to those knife whores who think they're oh so smart, even more so than when you turn around and drop them when they least expect it. And the last thing I want to highlight is that there will now be included a Spectator mode in Battlefield 4. This is going to be excellent for competitive players, and I'll be speaking with Dask about this in more detail very soon, but this feature is going to be amazing for producers like myself who like to give tactical views on gameplay. This feature is going to totally change up the content that I can provide to you guys and really allow for easier to understand, more detailed and more relevant analysis. It'll be great though for everyone all around when it comes to analysing and enjoying the game and the perspectives that you can have when you are looking at your overall Battlefield experience. So, my final thoughts for today. It seems that DICE have really listened to the community, and as Carl Magnus said to me in person that they would when I asked him about some of these questions at the Battlefield 4 reveal in Stockholm, and this is so very reassuring. The tweaks we have seen that so many people in the community have been asking for, whilst at the same time not compromising on the core aspects of Battlefield as a game, is hugely encouraging. The fact that they have brought in new major elements to the game is also excellent, as this shows they are not afraid to introduce strong new components to a title that's already established itself as the biggest FPS title in the world. Make no mistake, Battlefield 4 is going to be the FPS game to play for the coming years, and I feel more excited than ever to get started. As always guys, I'll have much more content coming up very soon. If you've enjoyed this video, please rate and share, and this is Luetin. I'll see you on the battlefield.